Hello. It's been a minute. Hey there, I'm Evan. This is your first video watching. Um, I've kind of been in this space of realizing that I don't need to validate my existence for people who are committed to misunderstanding me. And so I'm and so I'm feeling I'm feeling less and less inclined to share with people, "Hi, I'm autistic," or like "I'm autistic," just like, "Sure, cool." Um, and and having that understanding helps people to or I used to believe that telling people for the sake of understanding was sort of all that did, but honestly I realize now that um I don't need to validate myself to people who are committed to misunderstanding me. And most of the time people who don't understand me typically won't listen to my take anyway, and so it's not necessarily something I have to put up shields for. Um, which also falls right in line with me, like reconnecting with my senses and in a less conditional way. Um, changing the dynamic between thinking of myself as hypersensitive, as like detriment focused, as opposed to, or as opposed to thinking of myself as being a hypersensory individual. Like it's that whole thing between like who Matt Murdock was as a child versus who he is as an adult, as like as like lure as like lure by day, daredevil, as like lure by day, dare as by as as lure or as lawyer by day, daredevil by night. And sometimes those two tend to mix up in between each other, um, which is interesting because that I choose to use that as a good catalyst to bring us into the present. Today is April 14th. I was about to say April 14th, 1912, because Titanic Week, because 113 years ago, um, Titanic was basically experiencing the last night to where she would actually, yeah, or actually live to see the sun. Um, in the sense that this is the night of April 13th, and it's since turned into the 14th. But that being said, this time tomorrow night she will have been gone again for the 113th time. um, um, and so, yeah, it's Titanic Week. And also on April 8th of 2024, there was a huge solar eclipse that went right over this house. Um, like, um, my childhood house's name is Rosie. Um, 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 and we're a very similar age, and it's interesting because that was probably the only solar eclipse that we'll see in each other's lifetimes. Rosie and I shared lifetime, where an actual solar eclipse would go directly over her head and my head while I'm here. So really cool. Um, and also April 8th, 2016 was an interesting time for me because it was the time that I released my debut single, That Hype Doe, which was the first song that anyone ever heard from me, like on a public sense, but also it was the and also it was just the first time that any of that really and then a week later, um Identity, my first EP, which featured That Hype Doe, was released. um and April 15th is also my mom's birthday. And so again, there's a bunch of different stuff that happens during April, and also Titanic Week, and again, it's also Autistic Acceptance Month. Some people still call it Autism Awareness Month, but I wish not to pathologize myself or any other neurodivergent soul. So I and so I vie for acceptance even before people know to seek that, or know to advocate like for that for me and other people. So um yeah. Oh, also speaking of autistic advocates besides myself, I feel like there's levels to the different autistic advocate space, and the levels are sort of determined by expanded awareness. Um, like there's the people who are more so listeners, and then there are the people who are advocates who are like actually speaking out, and like the people who are posting things like for other autistic and other neurodivergent folk to see. And then there's other people, and there's a lot of different cutthroat stuff, and just perpetuation of different toxic patterns that ended up screwing us up in the first place. And much of that dynamic actually coming from ignorance. So fast forward to fast forward to let's see. So fast forward to now, or fast forward. So fast forward to let's see. So basically, enter autistic community slash autistic advocate level number 3. And honestly, I feel like there's only like 3 or 4 people, myself included, who are in that one. And I'll say 3 definitively. I want everyone to join this level, if you want to think of it that way. But really, it's more so just an expanded state of consciousness about the autistic experience and just the neurodivergent experience overall. And that's that. Hey, and those 3 people are me, Paige Leal, um, as well as Yeshuani. I feel like the 3 of us are sort of in a rarefied air, which I really wish wasn't rarefied. Once I get you up there where the air is rarefied. Anyways, um, um, yeah, just stuff like that just comes to me. If you're new here, then that's something to keep in mind. And honestly, all these topics are connected to the thing that I wanted to the thing that prompted me to turn the camera on this time. But or and all of these topics are really important. That being said, either way, to I want to speak with y'all about a specific one, and it ties in more with music. So, and I say more, but not to the exclusion of everything else, because again, it's all energetic. Everything's connected. um. So yeah, the other thing that I wanted, and so the primary thing I wanted to share in this video, um, like in there with the mix of all, in there in the mix of all the other things, is that Identity turns 9 tomorrow night. Um, um, my first EP, as I mentioned. Wait, did the air just turn on? Maybe, or maybe it's downstairs. Either way, um, but yeah, Identity just turned. No, Identity turns 9 this coming night, not this night, but the tomorrow night. And it's interesting because between April 8th, 2016 and August 21st, 2020, I dropped 116 original songs to the world. And it was a very interesting experience because basically what started out as just an experiment to just be like, hey, can I make music? It just turned into a whole, hey, let me tell you about my life with the tools that I have right now. and the thing is that the more that I went down that route and songs became projects and projects started to get more refined and longer and started to become things that I would actually consider albums as opposed to a mixtape or a compilation or an EP or anything like that. Um, it was a beautiful thing to see my expression evolve over time. That being said, I was just like I was still of a certain mindset about it. I was sort of thinking of it as like, oh, I'm the artist. Like, oh, I'm the person signed to the major record label who has to churn out an album every year. Um, and it was a fascinating thought exercise, but the thing is that like with the level of awareness that I had, um, um, there were many times where it became difficult to understand which idea was controlling the dynamic, like whether the idea of being or of being a signed artist, i.e., acting as i.e., acting as if i.e., acting as if like that dynamic in question was infallibly real to me and for me, like was something that was controlling me or something that I was using to sort of condition myself. And the answer over the course of that period of time is yes to both. But that being said, towards the end of that just over 4 year period, um, the answer started getting a bit less balanced. Um, and so the thing is that I was like, I'm going to stop creating music for a while because I feel like I'm stagnating. I feel like I'm not growing. I feel like there's a lot of stuff I want to learn, and there's a lot of stuff that I could learn and stand to learn. But that being said, I feel like I'm not. I feel like I'm not. I feel like I'm not being afforded the time and energy and effort that it would take for me to bring my music up to that higher level of quality that I always wanted. And so the thing is that like in like on August, actually on December 31st, 2020, I released my last single off my third album. Um, and it was called "Leave It While You Love It." And basically, in that song, I was just like sharing with people, like, "Hey, I'm gonna take a break," basically, and I inspired people to create their own music and to make music like there's no genre, and all the different stuff that I and all the different stuff that I and all the different stuff that I had planned out for me to do in that interim time where I was taking like less time. And it's interesting because going into that conversation, I was just like, huh. Well, here's the thing. Even back then, there was still this sort of recurring pattern of me having an idea of what I wanted, but me also not being entirely sure of what entity was controlling the dynamic in my life, in the sense of like whether a certain idea was controlling the dynamic of my life or dynamics in my life, or if my life was being or if my life was being or if I actually had as much control as I had liked to think I did at that particular point. And again, all this was also happening during the dead of COVID, and there was just a bunch of different stuff that I was still unaware of, despite previously gaining the title of being one of the most self-aware people that anyone who ever knew me ever knew, um, slash no. Um, yeah, it's just really interesting because this entire first half of this decade, the 2020s, has just been a time of like learning to take my mask off. And not just as a neurodivergent person, but also just as a human being who has been born into and has grown up in a world that's been built on pretenses, um, to the effectively absolute exclusion of truth, both personal and objective. And so again, there's a bunch of different stuff that was tied into there. And so over the course of like late 2020 up to now, I've been gaining a lot of different clarity on so many different things, just reevaluating every single aspect of my entire life and my mission, and in the confines as well as the in the confines of the world that I currently find myself in, as well as all the codes and keys and codes to help me to not just change it, because it's going to be changing either way, but changing it towards something that I like instead of something that continually drives itself down towards more benefit. Um, yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure climate change is pretty apparent to most people who are even remotely aware today. So yeah, that's a thing. Um, but yeah, the thing is that it wasn't until 2024, basically this time last year, that I started seriously working on music again. Um, and in that time, I started tripping, or I, there would be times where I would work on something and then I would get tripped up, and then that momentum would just stop. And again, there's all this different stuff that I was becoming more acutely aware of, so as to actually work with it and change it and do things with it that helped me. Um, and basically, I've been doing that for about and so basically, I've been doing that for about 12 and a half months now. And basically, where it's gotten me is to a realization that I think that most people, or at least a few people who communicated to me directly, that they really took a liking to my music, um, as of spring 2025. I'm pretty sure all of you know who you are. Um, I have some news that I think would actually benefit um, everyone, really, but stuff that would really make but but stuff that would really make those people happy. So basically, I have for a long time I was beholden to this idea that I had to be worthy, that I like that my music sucked so bad that just because it was created at this desk in this bedroom, with a single mic and like $100 MIDI controller that can fit in your backpack, and all the different s- stuff like that on computers with hardly enough RAM to support the grandeur and scope of even a single one of your ideas. Um, 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 After you separate yourself like enough from that dynamic to see that it's a dynamic, and to observe yourself being stuck in that dynamic of just like, oh, like my music will never be good enough until it reaches this sort of arbitrary threshold that people are never or that people are never like at all certain about, enough for me to be like, oh, it's reached this level, and so now I can share it with people. And that's the thing, even if it ever was at that level, it wouldn't make that much sense to me to spend several years of my life not releasing anything because people had told me that things had to be a certain way before I was ready to release them. A great takeaway here, in case anyone's wondering, and honestly, I kind of feel like my trauma response is talking at the moment, but I'm going to let them speak freely. Um, basically, um, people can't know what's best for you better than you can. And it's difficult at first whenever you're not as acquainted with yourself. But if you choose to make a practice of listening more to your intuitive knowing, um, to the point to where every single external voice or opinion from the outside comes second to that, it albeit not necessarily at the total exclusion of external input, because there is a such thing as good external input, which I'm still on my way to believing. Hashtag hashtag / shout out to Paramore, Hayley Williams. Um, uh, I, 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 the only exception. It's funny. I actually have Brand New Eyes on vinyl. It was, and looking back, it's actually one of the first records that I. It's one of the first records, and it's one of the first records I got. But back then, I got records at a slower pace. So either way, but yeah, the thing is that for the past 4.5, 5 years, I've just been thinking, oh, like like my music, it sucks so much in terms of quality, as I'm still learning, that it's like, oh, I feel like I need to learn more and more about mixing and mastering and EQing and what all these different effects do. And until I learn all those different things, I can't show my face ever again to people until I'm this big refined thing and I have like a distribution deal with Columbia or something, in the same way that Daft Punk did, or a distribution deal with or a excuse me, excuse me, or a distribution deal with like Bad Boy Records, like Janelle Monáe got whenever she dropped the Arcandroid, and and the Electric Lady, before she started really like making those like bigger, broader steps to create Wonderland Records, um, and sort of create her own thing. And that's the thing. Basically, Ansel Elgort had it right, um, in his singing verse on Killing Spree. Um, living your life, just living your life. Can't nobody tell you how to do it right, except you. Um, and so that's the thing. The thing is that it's so the thing is that like the thing is that it's only been in like this month where I'm just like, wait, or actually just this weekend, honestly. It's like Sunday going into Monday, and the thing is that like it's just been over the course of this weekend that I realized, wait a minute, maybe they're actually maybe maybe if I actually shared with people the experience of me learning how to create things that more vividly mirror the sounds I hear in my head, if I actually brought people along for that process and did it more intuitively, like even the old stuff in the old vlogs and different stuff that Imogen Heap used to do whenever she was making her second and third albums, like in the early days of YouTube. It's weird to call them the early days because Anyways, isn't that crazy that YouTube's turning 20 this year? Wow, that's insane to me. But yeah, anyways, so yeah, hashtag me at the zoo. Shout out me at the zoo. Turning 20 this year. That's mad. But yeah, um, basically, um, the main premise of this video, um, is I'm back, and I'm not exactly sure, or I'm not exactly sure what, or I'm not exactly confident I can tell you what to expect in, or in the sort of musical output that I'm doing. But that being said, um, but I can tell you exactly how it will end. That's the thing. Basically, these past 4.5 years, every day has been exactly the same, in some sort of fundamental way or another, and it hasn't been fun. It's been fundamental, but it hasn't been fun. And it's interesting because now I'm learning about EQs and equalizers and sound frequencies and harmonics and different stuff like that. And so it's like, I think it's about time I put the fun back in fundamental. That's awesome. That's awesome. And so basically, instead of perpetuating the sort of like tortured artist, this like motif, like where the artist goes away for years at a time into their cave, into their creative space, and they basically like cut themselves open in some sort of way, and and somehow energetically bleed over some sort of canvas, some sort of medium, and then after they're done with it, whatever that is said to mean, which, because they never really share that with us, like growing up, like you only ever see the finished product. It's like you didn't see all the different stuff that went into Trent Reznor making the Downward Spiral by Nine Inch Nails. You didn't see all the different stuff that went into him making Pretty Hate Machine or any of that other stuff. You didn't see all the different stuff. You didn't see how you didn't see how you didn't see any of the steps, and so you're just like, oh, like, and then on top of that, you were raised by a bunch of people who didn't really have like a strong value realization in art. And so basically, they had their own sort of cognitive biases about people who created stuff, and they were just like, "Oh, okay, you, I have my own ideas about creative types and starving artists and different stuff like that. Particularly about the fact that they starve, and I don't want to starve, and that whole um stuff that people who aren't particularly creative use to sort of separate themselves from people who are not only particularly creative, but who are also putting themselves out there, and putting their artistry out there into the world. And so it's like I didn't really have very, I didn't really have that many good role models in general. But as far as like, I didn't really have that many good role models in general. But as far as like other stuff goes, as far as creative role models, I basically had nil, in the sense that I had like maybe a few art teachers who didn't really believe in themselves or me as much as I would have needed them to in order to help me to evade like such hurdles. On one end, like the sort of grassroots end, the people closest to me, and then on the extreme, eh, and then on the extreme farther end would be like Michael Jackson, like creating some of the greatest stuff ever, or recorded into audio, Um, but yeah, in the time since me starting to release music, um, um, and even create music. And also the time when my hiatus started. I've just I've learned so much about everything, um, especially myself and life and my capabilities and and the things that I am willing to accept and the things that I am willing to not accept. And the along with sort of rekindling or recovering rather the strength that I need to change the things that I cannot accept. And yeah, and that's the thing. I can't accept being passive. I can't accept being a person who waits for somebody else's approval for my work. Um, in order for me to feel okay with putting it out. Um, yeah, 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 and a huge part of that was just fundamentally realizing that I'm out of that sort of major label artist cycle that I had intentionally sorry that I had intention that I had intentionally put myself in so as to help me to understand what it's like for like a Tate McRae or like a 90s era Trent Reznor or even a Michael Jackson to a slightly lesser extent. This idea of like being somebody who's on the hamster wheel, and like I wanted to know what it was like to to live in and embody that dynamic that Alicia Keys always talks about between her first and or like with the time between her first and second album, Songs in A Minor, going into Diary of Alicia Keys, in the sense that basically like there's this whole thing of like you get your whole life to produce and create your debut album, but then and back then getting a debut album out to where everyone could hear it and distribute um just promotion and distribution wise and budget wise, basically you had to basically you basically you like basically like you had to sign to a major record label in order to make that happen for yourself. And so from that time you get your whole life to do your debut album, and then basically they give you and then basically she said they give you a year, maybe 2 years max, to give the world your like, sophomore album. And that dynamic, and I'm about to sound like Janet Jackson, which I actually love. This dynamic created the sophomore slump. This need created the velvet rope. um, 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 wow, just incredible. And it's also crazy that I have Songs in A Minor, Diary of Alicia Keys, and the Velvet Rope like on vinyl now, which is crazy. Like I would have never foreseen like 17-year-old me having those three albums on vinyl, like one of which I didn't even know about. Like at 16 or 17, it being the Velvet Rope. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I didn't know about it at all. Like I might have seen like maybe a tiny like little like mention of it like on Janet's Wikipedia page. But either way, like back then I wasn't as into Janet's music, and again, like stuff requires her stuff requires a certain level of awareness. This is turning out to be just a big conversation on life and music. And so basically, um this is my video and my channel, isn't it? Which means I don't have to have it fit into anybody else's format, because again, the people who actually gel with me, they will see all the different value that I'm giving here, even in many of the cases when I don't even see the value myself. And yeah, if you're still watching this, then there's probably a 100% chance that you are one of those people who see the value in what I have to say, and even how I have to say it. And so, um, so I'm gonna share with y'all, like my process of creating these, or my process of learning how to create these sounds that I hear in my mind, hear in my head. Um, like just the other night, I was listening to Green Light by Lorde on vinyl off of Melodrama, which I'm so glad that I got that album on vinyl too. Oh, also, in my now playing section, shout out to FKA Twigs, Eusexua, and the hey, and the generally proclaimed, particularly at this time in history, greatest of all time, Kendrick Lamar, with his album GNX. Um, Still the most in demand rapper on the face of the planet at the moment. But it's interesting because he's in demand, but at the same time, I feel like it's more appropriate to stay popular because sure he might be in demand, but he's probably not taking very many demands. Like especially if you listen to GNX, because again, like my gosh, people slept on Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers because basically, like that album really opened everything up. In the sense that a lot of the different profundity and trauma was sort of like put on full display to Pimp a Butterfly, and then Damn was basically like, oh, okay, let's start to dive into this one, but also let's make it mainstream because people think that I only do profound stuff. Like, hey, um, um, but then Mr. Morale came in, and basically that's an album about therapy, and there's so much different stuff that he dove into and felt his way through and broke through, and basically he listening to that album was like basically like stepping into a Kendrick album thinking that I would basically be looking into a mirror that showed Kendrick, only to find out by the time I heard or only to find out by the time I heard the song Mirror, the last song on the second half, um, was that basically Kendrick was that basically Kendrick is the mirror, and he was a mirror who was mirroring back to me that I am also a mirror. And so it's like, wait a minute, I get it now. And maybe that's why over time, like out of the big three, Drake, J. Cole, and Kendrick, I've always connected with Kendrick just a little bit more, like over time, like a lot more now, but even the whole time through, just a little bit more like with Kendrick than I did anyone else before. Um, I miss sharing stuff like this with y'all. And again, I'm not going to gaslight myself and say, oh, I've been in my own head, it's my fault, because it's not all my fault. I've been dealing with a lot of different stuff. Like my grandmother died. Um, um, I've been I've been getting denied in a bunch of different ways that I won't necessarily get into. Like in this particular time, because again, I feel like everything in my life deserves to be spoken about because it's happened and most people don't know the things that happened to me. Most people don't suspect that the things that have actually happened to me have happened to me based on how I carry myself. They think, oh, Evan's such a bright, bubbly person. Like, how could he have gone through so much trauma? Honestly, the degree, hey, or honestly, the level of trauma is actually the thing that inspired me to double down on being as positive and beneficial and benevolent as I am, as Benny as I am, Bene, as Benny as I am. Um, but yeah, again, there's so much different stuff that I could say, but either way, um, maybe, maybe that's the, maybe that was the purpose of this video. Just, just speaking out and fleshing out all my thoughts, and y'all are gonna get this too, but now that I've put more of them out there, I've sort of gotten into the, I've sort of gotten back into the whole idea of the talking head sort of like video form, like back for myself and in a more reclaimed way than it started out as being like 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 9, 10-ish months ago. Um um it's like I said, new year, no niche. um yeah, because that's the thing. It's like I just have things to share, and I don't think that I need to explain how they fit into how they fit into the confines of anything else, because they don't. So yeah, how do I want to say this at the how do I want to say this at the end of the video, just to give people a more condensed thing? People who want to hear the big announcement, but they don't necessarily want. Wait, no, but they do, but who would listen to the whole thing here if they could right then, but who want a more condensed version. Basically, at the end of this video, I'm going to share this thing, and then I'm going to and then I'm gonna I'm gonna record another video that will be like, oh, okay, this is what I needed to say, and it's gonna be a lot shorter. Yeah. So I've been actually one thing that the universe and I have in common is that we don't like redundancy. So I'm going to to so I'm going to refine my sentiment real quick instead of saying it and recording it twice. Um, and after that, I'm going to turn the camera back on, or turn Tenzin back on. He is my camera, my phone. Um, and I'm going to just go from there. 2:04 a.m. I'm tired. But that being said, I'm also wired, so it's important to sort of have that balance of both, which is interesting because, to quote the Naked and Famous, I'm trying to find the in between, which is amazing. All right, I'm gonna turn the camera off for a few minutes while I formulate the condensed version of this big announcement. So yeah, maybe we call this one a goodie bag of ideas, the calm before the storm. Bam! I like that one.